to be used for private events that help to generate the revenue that are needed to support the operations of Union Depot and to leverage the investment that's being made in it.
You might think of it as a public plaza, living room type thing,
Yes.
sort of a European plaza.
I have two more questions, Tony Bennett and Jan Parker.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, that plaza is at the concourse level, right? It's above the track.
The Great Hall or the waiting? The waiting room?
The Great Hall out on the end.
Yes, the Great Hall is a couple feet below the waiting room. The concourse slopes down, but it is contiguous. There are no steps.
No, but it's one level above the track. The track will be underneath it.
The track is
The track is south of it.
The track is south. So the Great Hall is up here, and the tracks are down, particularly down this way, at the very south end of the waiting room.
But it'll be at the, okay, but it'll be at the same, basically the same level as the concourse.
Yes.
The
Yes.
Great Hall is the head house.
It's a great place to put that, what was it we called it when we were looking at the west building, the plinth? Over the top of the tracks all the way up to the Excel Center. And you could have a walkway all the way.
Along the river is what
Remember that?
it was what he said.
Plinth was the term that I always remembered.
Yes.
Actually, what it was a deck over the top of the tracks.
Right.
So that which connected the lower town to the upper area.
Right.
Okay, Tony, you're done?
Yeah.
Jan?
Okay, I think I got stuck on the same concept that Commissioner Carter did in thinking about, the Great Hall and the living room concept. Right now it seems so big and echoey that it doesn't seem like a living room. It doesn't seem cozy at all. And there's a lot of, just the height. Is there anything that can be done architecturally to bring that scale down at all?
I don't know we haven't looked at it, and I don't know if I'd recommend it. I think that the concept here is that, and living room, is maybe just too simple a set of terms that then connote something else. But the concept is really to create an indoor civic space that people can congregate in. It is large and echoey, but I think that we think it has great potential to be an interior space that can function in many ways like a park or plaza does.
But I think there are also place-making strategies that a private investor or a public entity can implement within the Great Hall that will make it more homey, I think.
Right.
You might think about it as a living room and event space, just as Mears Park is. Mears Park is the living room of Lower Town, an outdoor living room of Lower Town, but it also has the Twin Cities Jazz Festival in it. And so that time dimension is in there. But certainly I think that just the status quo of what's in there now that I know is not going to be part of the depot plan, the platform is going to be removed and so on, there are mechanisms to make it more homey. Maybe there are movable chairs that you can move wherever you want. There may be
Plants.
exactly.
That can be moved
In Spain, the Atocha train station has a greenhouse within it. There are multiple different things that you can do to help make the place stay or make it feel like a living room while also keeping it flexible.
Right. Bring in temporary art, and that's one of the ways in which it can embrace both the Lower Town artist community, but also arts throughout Ramsey County.
Okay, Jan? Tony, did you have a
I
follow-up?
was just going to comment to my colleague that was designed for the echo effect when they were announcing the trains. They had speakers back then, and if you watch any old gangster movies or whatever, you can hear the footsteps on the stairs, and you can hear the echoes, and you can hear the trains being called out, and whether it's a living room and you want the trains to be called out or what connections to be called out, I'm sure you will. That echo effect is part of the ambiance, whatever the word.
Okay, go ahead and continue.
Great. So the last part of the presentation is really what are some of the keys to implementing the vision and the recommendations we have for that. The first is to take steps to make the depot and the property itself more marketable. And some of those steps include things that are included within the current design build plan. Some may be augmentations. Connections to the riverfront is something that we believe very strongly in. Will help to improve the economics of the building. The better that you have connections to the riverfront and people think about the building not just as being a place to get to the to trains and buses, but also a portal to the riverfront and a gateway to the riverfront.
I think that's very important to get people into the waiting room. You know, the waiting room is something that people haven't seen in 4 decades, and it's a space that unless you give people a reason to go there, whether it's programming, whether it's a marketplace, or whether it's a connection to the riverfront.
Right. And it will be transit services, but other than that, we don't want the waiting room to be a dead end. We want it to be something that people naturally want to go into for a variety of purposes. Signature on-site public realm development, this is something that we work with cities all over the country, and thinking about we see elements of the High Line, and I mentioned that was a project that we worked on in the beginning, but there's along the train deck outside, there's a really unique form where the train deck meets the street, and there's an opportunity, we think, for having some kind of linear gateway park that could help to establish long-term value for Union Depot, and potentially over the very long term for development on some of the other 35 acres that you own that are not going to be dedicated to transit infrastructure. And thinking about some small moves that could be made now that could enhance that value later on. Most of the residential development in downtown St. Paul has been led with open space. Waputa Commons and the Upper Landing led with open space. The High Line in New York, Millennium Park in Chicago, I think, have shown in an amplified way how it is that making public realm investment can really enhance residential and commercial value. And there we think, are some very interesting opportunities to do that on the Union Depot property. We've spoken a lot about civic space flexibility and flexibility in general, but making sure that spaces within the depot are really thought of within the public psyche as this is like a park or plaza, it just happens to be indoors, and it's something that invites people into for reasons other than transit.
Which is great for a winter city.
Right. The marketplace concept itself will require some additional vendor demand analysis and target tenants, and really finding the way in which a marketplace can be truly complementary to the farmers market. We've thought of some strategies. There are certain things that aren't allowed to be sold at the farmers market, for example, in the food realm.
Right, you need to be a farm-based business to be in the farmer's market. I know that the farmer's market has a lot of excess demand for people who want to sell goods there, but either they don't have room or they're not based on a farm. And you know, we believe that there's demand, but I think the key here is that unlike you know, a Washington, D.C. Union Station where there are national tenants and you have the capacity to do that, this is likely a little bit different tenanting strategy, and especially with the desire to get local tenants. There needs to be a developer that might not be local, that might be a national developer, needs to understand what that market might be, who those tenants might be. This is something that people around the country do to set up public markets, and they analyze the region, Ramsey County, and say, you know, what businesses want to start up, what businesses want a second location, what businesses want to be downtown. And that sort of analysis can give a developer more assurance that the project will work.
Right. And then also, I think lastly, if there are ways that Ramsey County, without committing its funds, can help to leverage and bring in other forms of public financial support, much as you've done for the Union Depot renovation with the $75 million plus in federal funding, legacy amendment funding might be one potential target from the state in terms of arts and historic resources. But are there other forms of public financial support that can be brought in that can provide, for example, programming that can be all the more robust to help to make the station function and create that economic value, or to create more connections to the riverfront and the like. In terms of thinking about how the building and the program should be operated, we recommend a sewerage structure where the rail authority, as the site owner, it or its transit partners would serve as the managers of the transit infrastructure, and the rail authority would serve as the interface and hold the relationship with the transit service provider. But what we recommend is that most of the space in the building, or about half of the space in the building, be subject to a public-private partnership and a master lease structure that enables marketplace development, management, and programming, and uses the best of the private sector to come up with the appropriate tenant mix, put more of the burden of programming on them, and create that revenue stream that we're talking about, which might involve some kind of base rent. It's likely that early on the base rent would be quite low, if not in some cases the base rent for marketplaces is zero, but you'd want to make sure to structure something in a master lease where there's participation rent down the line that creates that revenue stream for the county. And it's a concept, and we think, we recommend that it be tested in the marketplace to see what kind of financial offer is the best one that can be put together. But the public-private partnership model can help to reduce the rail authority's management responsibilities. These pie charts, and sorry that they're both shades of blue, but the darker one shows that if you were to think about Ramsey County Regional Rail serving as the landlord for tenants, of the 185,000 square feet, only that 26,000 square feet is demarcated tenant space that would be offloaded to tenants, where Ramsey County would be responsible for the maintenance of about 160,000 square feet. We think under a master lease structure that Ramsey County Regional Rail's responsibility could be less than 50% of the building and really focused on the transit infrastructure, where the rest of the space could be master leased in terms of operations, maintenance, programming, and tenant identification to a private partner. This can help to maximize opportunities for entrepreneurship and to help to realize the public aspirations for the depot with minimal public cost.
I mean, in particular, it's that minimal public cost. Even when Eric mentions that a base rent for a public market might be zero, well, there's a question of how much space they're responsible for managing. So although their base rent might be zero, right, they're paying for the management of the building. Right. And the question is, how much of the building are they paying for?
Right. Rent of zero means reducing operating costs by, it's unclear exactly what the figure is, but it's a figure something on the order of $8 to $12 a square foot. Right. Of operating costs, which you can take off your ledger in either of the scenarios with a tenant or master lessee. But I think more importantly with the master lessee, you're reducing the operating costs.
Basically, you have a per square foot operating cost for the building, and the question is how many square feet is on the Ramsey County balance sheet versus a private investor's balance sheet.
Before you move on, I think it's important to make a comment here. Early on, one of your slides, you talked about how to set the stage and clearly, get phase one right. To me, these two slides are really the biggest part of this presentation, because this will determine how we start. I mean, we all know if we get too far down the road with not having the right kind of, not necessarily a governance structure, but really a kind of a management structure on how we're going to do this, we can tie our hands to really early on if we don't make some really good, wise decisions about this. So to me, these are the recommendations that you guys are putting forward. There's other models out there certainly, but that'll be one of our biggest decision-making points here, is about how we move forward on the management of this structure, and that overflows into the community, but really in relationship to Union Depot itself, what we actually own and operate. Jan?
And this is why I thought we needed to do this kind of a contract, to have this kind of a study done, because we're not in the business of running retail operations and successful, public venues. And so I really support this model. Do you have details about how we get there? Like, what would it look like?
Well, I think the first detail it came a couple slides ago, which is make the project more marketable. It's a tough economic climate out there, especially for real estate developers, retail developers. But there are certain steps, in addition to the investments that you're making in the building already, that can make developers more interested in the project. But I think that sort of list of making the project more marketable, whether it's a connection to the riverfront, whether it's a signature public realm investment, whether you identify the demand for potential local tenants within the space, whether you obtain legacy funding for a signature art project within the building that can make it more marketable, whether there is public financing available for it. I think there are a bunch of steps in terms of making the project more marketable, as well as simply, defining the parameters of what space they would have. Here we've shown, 94,000 square feet, maybe 95,000 square feet of the building that could